there has been no really end to the killings and the crises that have been ravaging Nigeria in the last few years. And of course, there are several organizations that have been tracking and monitoring the happenings in Nigeria over the last few years. And one of such organizations is the Stefanos Foundation, which only yesterday or today brought out a report of the first half of this year on the killings, the abductions, and the security challenges affecting Nigeria. And with us today to discuss this report is no other person than Mark Lipdo, the founder and chief executive of the Stefanos Foundation. My brother, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I've just seen, going through your report that you issued today, the first half of 2026. What are the key findings, or what are the key things that have happened in the last 6 months of this year?
Yeah, actually, those who have been following reporting, you would have witnessed or noticed that these reportings, we release them on weekly basis. And we have started this reporting since 2001. We've been documenting them. And so when there was denial this year, let's say last year, December, when America attempted intervening in the situation in Nigeria, so many people came out to dispute. And so we became more deliberate and more accurate in documenting it. So we have been releasing on weekly basis and then summing them every month. And this is how every quarter, that is we release a quarterly report. In the second quarter, which ends in June, we have what we recorded in the past, and this is what we release.
What are the key highlights of the findings?
If you look at the record, you will discover that we go by the number of incidents of violence that we have seen that are uncontrollable in this country. And so within this month, we sum up what we have recorded from January to June. And we found out that there were 643 incidents of violence that have killed 2,543 people. And then we also recorded 1,809 persons kidnapped and 402 other persons injured in these incidences that we recorded. And we also try to compare every month together. And since from January to May, we found out that February in the first quarter was the highest, with instances up to 500, that brought about 545 deaths. And then in May, we recorded the highest deaths of 599. So these 2 months in the half, in half a year, half of this year, recorded the highest of deaths. When we put the number of deaths over the instances or incidents of violence in Nigeria, shows that currently 14 persons are dying over the violence of insurgency in Nigeria. So if you look at it, if we say 14 persons are being killed every day, at the end of this year, you will have had over 5,000 people dead. Because in half a year, 2,500 are dead. So what will happen in the next year is what we are concerned about. And we put out these reports so that leaders will look at what we are seeing and what the world is looking at. And we found out that in analyzing the report, 59% of the instances were accrued to Muslim Fulani militant herdsmen that target Christian farming communities and attack them and kill people. So 59% of those instances, they were responsible for it. We have those killings that are given to a group that are called bandits. Some of us know that most of these bandits are even Fulani, but because in such instances, we do not know whether we have also recorded them differently. That gave us 25% of the instances we recorded. Whereas Boko Haram and ISWAP are responsible for 10%, and other instances, gunmen or violent related instances were about 6%. So altogether, this is what we saw that happened last 6 months of this year.
Okay, compared to last year, what would be your assessment that we're having de-escalation, or it is normalized, or it is increasing?
November last year was the highest. That was when America stepped into intervening. In comparing November with this first quarter 2006, we discovered that February was highest. And now looking again to May is even higher. And so everything, all the instances are on the so last year that it was just 30 or about 30 states that were affected. In this case, 32 states are affected in all the 6 geopolitical zones. The violence is covering, rising, and covering the whole nation as seen by our record.
Now, still on this matter, can you further break it down to the states? Do you have the data on how the states rank in what has happened? Which states are having the highest level of attacks and the highest level of casualties?
Yeah, normally we compare all the states, and like I said, 32 states are affected, but then we look at the 10 most affected, and we came up with Plateau being the highest, followed by Borno, and then Zamfara, Kaduna, and so on and so forth. I don't have the list here, but it's there published, and people can see it. But Plateau obviously ranks the highest in the past 6 months of our records.
If we are to look at what is happening now, what would you say about the arguments that came up the last year when the United States government wanted to intervene, that the crisis that we've had are actually not as a result of any religious problem, but because of the nature of the multi-layered crisis that we have in Nigeria, namely that there are many factors that are responsible. From your findings, what actually are the factors? What are the reasons? Is it the clashes over land, or what is responsible for this spike?
In our recording, starting from 2001, we know that this incident started with agitation. They called for Sharia in 1999, and we discovered that 12 states inaugurated Sharia. And that was what began this violent hatred targeting non-Muslims in northern Nigeria, starting with Plateau State crisis that 4th of on the 7th of September, crisis erupted in Jos, and it was just 4 days before the World Trade Center of 9/11. And so we discovered that that was the height of the international spreading of insurgency that began to orchestrate violence within the country. And when things became out of hand, seemingly became out of hand with mob rioting, Muslim mob rioting, targeting non-Muslims in northern Nigeria, we began to see the rise of Boko Haram in Northeast, insurgent groups rising like Boko Haram. From 2003, Ahmed Yusuf started until he perfected it in 2009 when he started arresting and kidnapping and taking Christians into camp and forcing people to denounce their faith, Islam. That went on, and until today, we began to see the rise of militant Fulani, Muslim Fulani headsmen that are targeting communities, particularly the communities, Christian farming communities in the Middle Belt. And so when you compare, even though some of the headsmen attacks started in Zamfara and the the late President Buhari tried and made attempts in his own way to control it in Zamfara. Those people at the end of it were enabled to practice their carnage, and we discovered that they attacked Muslims, particularly Muslims of the Hausa ethnic group, because we know that the owners of that place of Zamfara, Katsina, Sokoto are mostly Hausa people, and they have been conquered in time past by this radical form of Islam, and that is why the Fulani are all the leaders in those areas. They are the emirs that are ruling over the Hausa people. And so when the carnage was started by the militant Fulani in Zamfara, they became uncontrollable gradually, and they began to target the Christian farming communities in the Middle Belt. And since they came into southern Kaduna, spread into Plateau, and they have gone into Adamawa, some part of Taraba, and Benue has been on the heat recently. Even now, we begin to hear Enugu is also complaining. And of course, the popular kidnapping in Oyo, Niger became victim, and Kwara was heightened as well. And so these are the, form of spreading of the violence that we have noticed in our recording. And today, the militant Muslim Fulani headsmen have affected kidnapping and targeting leaders within. Some pastors have been targeted, politicians have also been targeted, traditional rulers have been targeted by their form of violence. And so these three forms of radical violence targeting Nigeria is what informed our records that we found in our records.
Yeah, talking about your records, it's curious that the Northeast, which has Boko Haram, is witnessing more deaths. I mean, less deaths and attacks than central parts of Nigeria, like the Middle Belt, like places like Kaduna, southern Kaduna in particular, and Plateau. Where do you think that is?
Yeah, since the coming of President Buhari, I said in 2016, we saw the rise of the militant Fulani headsmen, Muslim Fulani headsmen attack on communities. So those did not go to the Northeast, and we saw an attempt of President Buhari to control Boko Haram. So the attention was directed on Boko Haram internationally. There was an international attention that was drawn to the Northeast that appeared to have controlled Boko Haram in that area. But the militant Muslim Fulani headmen have not been accepted. They have not been proscribed. They have not been seen as a risk in this country. And so there have not been any intervention in them. When our records show that they were one of the groups that should be controlled, we saw the American intervention. We thought it was going to address the headsmen violence towards Middle Belt. Whereas we saw what happened was that they targeted the Lukrawa instead in Sokoto. And up till now, there has not been any intervention targeting the violent Muslim Fulani headsmen militant.
Yeah, but the argument of the government that was pushed by several high-profile visitation to the United States, that it is not a religious crisis, that you have criminality, you have people that are just criminals. And so what will be a reaction to the pushback by government that the things that have happened have nothing to do with religion?
What surprised us is that whatever is the reason, whatever is the cause as identified by this government, has the attack reduced? Has the killing stopped? No. Whatever is your definition for this violence, if it is right, by now we would have seen the effect on ground. But you see, it's like trying to take Panadol for injury, that the cut that you have on your feet. If you do not dress the wound, definitely it will get infected and you will become sick from that wound. If you continue to take Panadol without dressing it, and that is what is happening. If conflict is not correctly identified, is not correctly defined, then of course the wrong intervention is applied, and we will continue to face the same problem until we identify and define it as such. And so, to us who are putting down the records are there on ground. The records don't lie. And so, it is clear that the violence is still there, whether it is seen as religious or not. The violence is still there, and the government have done nothing to control it. And we still see the same perpetrators identified as the cause of the crisis, as the people that are perpetrating. And as far as we're concerned, we see religion in the play, and we feel that the religious aspect of it should be addressed. If we see terror as the reason, why address Lukrawa and neglect Fulani terrorism? As far as we are concerned, if we're addressing terrorism, then we should address them as a whole. Address Lukrawa, address the Fulani, Muslim Fulani headsmen attacks on communities, address Boko Haram, address ISWAP, and so on and so forth. And by that, we would have been able to control this. But enabling the crime and criminality that comes with the headsmen spreading into other parts of the country will not solve the problem. And so I think it's time that the government listen to the United States rights and allow and address the right way that they think, in the way that they think.
Yeah, I've noticed from one of your responses that you don't seem to think that the United States has followed up on its pledge to do what it's supposed to do in Nigeria. What is your assessment of the intervention of the United States? How successful do you think it has been in trying to bring a closure to this problem in Nigeria?
Well, we do not know of their strategy. All we know is that they had an intention and their definition went correctly with what we recorded. But the intervention, according to our record, is not effective. So I think it's high time America looks into their intervention. I cannot say whether they have not intervened. I cannot say whether they are no longer getting involved with the Nigerian issue. All we can say is that the record is showing that the intervention is not effective and the criminality is increased, and there are more communities that are being sacked. And so I think it's time for America to look at its own policies and see if they can do more for Nigerians.
And finally, you were talking about villages being sacked and the rest of them. People have been casting doubt on this claim that villages or settlements have been captured. How do you really prove that settlements have been captured? Do you have, how do we that certain places have been captured and people cannot go back?
We carried out research 2 years ago of communities around Plateau State. When the attack intensified on Plateau State, we followed up on communities that were attacked 10 years backward. Research showed that we recorded over 300 communities that have been sacked by these attacks. Some of them are completely taken over by the Fulani. Others, in fact, they have become no-go area. I came across a church that was turned into a mosque by Fulani, and nobody, no native Birom, has been able to go back to that. And so on our record, we have over 300 communities proven, and we have the coordinates of those communities, and we have records of when they were attacked. Some communities have been attacked repeatedly. And even when the occupants, even when the host community was taken into IDP camp and the government made attempt to resettle them, we have discovered that they have now been permanently sacked, and some of them are permanently in town, in cities, together with their family members. And so it's no more a hidden fact. We have the records that in Plateau State there are over 300 communities that are in 5 local governments, namely Jos North, Barakiladi, Okos, and Mangu. And so we have all those records of how many communities in each of these local governments are no longer belonging and occupied by the ethnic people in that area. Zamfara is one of kind of areas that most of the communities, most of the other communities are no longer, they are permanently occupied by the Fulani, and they are making that place a zone. So these facts that we have is no longer hidden, that communities have been sacked.
All right. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mark, for the time you spent with us. We wish you well in the task that you are involved in. Thank you for coming on our show.
Thank you very much for having me.